Hello friend, my name is James Matthews, and I'd like to talk to you today about a couple of things. I'd like to talk to you about the word contagion. I'd also like to talk to you about the word pandemic. And I'd like to talk to you about some training that I had when I was on active duty in the United States Marine Corps from 1993 to 1997 when I was stationed at Camp Pendleton in Southern California. Specialized training called NBC training at the time. What did that stand for? Nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare training. Friends, come along with me as we learn a little bit about this training and a little bit about propaganda and what it means for us.
We just got word about a chemical storage facility where 2 employees went missing. They're still punched in and there's suspected hazardous materials inside, so we're about to enter the building.
We're checking the door to see if it's hot. Once we get inside, we do a 360 sweep of the room. So we came back and we sampled the powder and the 2 liquid jars. Once we identify the hazards and we know what we have downrange, then we're clear to take the casualty out through the decontamination line and get them to medical.
We're about to extract.
In recent news, we've seen a lot of stuff going on in Syria where there's been attacks versus the rebel forces and the government that's there, and the use of chemical weapons on the populace there. Thankfully, we as Americans haven't had to experience that yet, but that fear exists, and to get ahead of that, that's why we're doing this training. Guardian Centers here is able to provide us with a realistic environment. This allows us to kind of push the limits of our gear, to really use it to test the capabilities and to validate that it actually works. Here they have a cityscape, which we use as kind of an urban environment for us to be able to practice doing sensitive site exploitation and then utilizing the detection equipment. Here they provide nearly live sources. I mean, they take you almost right to the actual chemical agent, and it stops short of putting us in harm's way. But that allows us to validate our tactics, techniques, and procedures and our SOPs and how we would actually respond to a live CBRN response. We are down at the lowest levels of the infantry battalions, training those infantry Marines and all those other MOSs that support the fight to be able to survive in a CBRN environment. We practice what we do in hopes of that never happening.
My MOS was not NBC. I was not a biological weapons specialist. I was a supply guy. My MOS was a 3052. I did supply. I actually wound up doing long-term preservation of weapons. But the 3 days of training I had, learning how to decontaminate people, vehicles, and equipment in the event of a nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons attack, helped me to see through the propaganda that began to spread early on about COVID. It prompted me to begin to warn people, and the platform I was using at the time was Facebook. I wound up being banned repeatedly, a total of 13 times. Initially it was just 3 days at a time, and then it progressed and it became months. It became months at a time. This warning isn't gonna come in time for many. It's going to be late, but it's going to help many of you open your eyes.
I am a chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear defense specialist. So our mission is basically to defend against all chemical warfare agents and other weapons of mass destruction.
DERSCO training stands for Dismounted Reconnaissance Sets, Kits, and Outfits. The training is invaluable. The DERSCO that we use down at the Guardian Center is the very same equipment that we would use in a forward deployed contaminated environment. It gives the Marines a sense of real-world, live, contaminated environment operations. We started off the first week in a classroom environment, and then we proceeded into doing small-scale practical application exercises with some of that equipment. And then during the second week, it was full scale. Every day we were operating in a different type of environment with a different type of contamination, different levels of PPE, different types of detection equipment, as well as proceeding through the decontamination lines at the end of every operation.
Getting more into the mindset of how an enemy thinks, knowing how to identify what they're sending against us so we don't lose more than we have to, I think is the most important thing that we need.
Okay, friend, did you notice how the members of the military were wearing specialized gear? Masks, hoses, with bags on their sides, and these big canisters that are used to decontaminate the air that we breathe. Those are what people wear in a real pandemic, in a real biological warfare situation, in a real chemical warfare situation, in a real nuclear warfare situation, in a real outbreak like was claimed in Wuhan. Follow? Friend, if your government and media were lying to you, how would you know? How would you know if they were actually making war against you? How would they do that? I have an idea.
You and everyone you know has a piece of DNA in your genome, put there without your knowing it.
Put there by whom?
Well, that's the question of the day.
This is an internet lunatic. You're not saying you believe him.
Hold on, Agent Einstein. You're talking to a scientist.
Forgive me, Assistant Director. It may sound insensitive, but the suggestion is pure science fiction.
What I'm saying, Agent Einstein, is that the facts, as I understand them, cannot be discounted out of hand.
You say they're tampering with our DNA, that they're able to shut down our immune systems by the addition of something to our DNA.
Yes, but I don't know how exactly.
Or how it's being triggered.
I don't know that either.
Or why it's happening now.
What can we possibly do?
We need to act quickly.
You were right about that.
Well, I was wrong about the science. I was wrong about what's causing it. Dead wrong, in fact.
But it's clearly a widespread failure of our immune systems.
Through gene tampering. A virus within a virus that was put there through the smallpox vaccine. It's what these men are calling the Spartan virus.
We have to figure this out. What's wrong with the science?
Okay. The Spartan virus removes the adenosine deaminase gene from your DNA. Remove the ADA gene and your immune system will simply vanish.
Yeah, but I'm not getting sick.
It's only a matter of time.
Okay. So how does it work? How does the virus remove the ADA gene?
A process called CRISPR-Cas.
CRISPR-Cas9. RNA and a protein cutting genes at exact locations.
Exactly, but in this instance used as a weapon.
The ultimate weapon. The ability to depopulate the planet. To kill everyone but the chosen.
By tampering with their DNA.
through gene editing.
Why do such a thing and lie about it? Our own government.
Your own government lies as a matter of course, as a matter of policy. The Tuskegee experiments on black men in the 30s, Henrietta Lacks.
What are they trying to do?
That's the missing piece.
But it's not hard to imagine a government hiding, hoarding technology for 70 years at the expense of human life and the future of the planet. Driven not only by corporate greed, but a darker objective.
The takeover of America.
And then the world itself, by any means necessary, however violent, or cruel, or efficient. By severe drought, brought on by weather wars, conducted secretly using aerial contaminants and high-altitude electromagnetic waves. In a state of perpetual war. To create problem, reaction, solution scenarios to distract, enrage, and enslave American citizens at home. With tools like the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act, which abridge the Constitution in the name of national security. The militarization of police forces in cities across the U.S., the building of prison camps by the Federal Emergency Management Agency with no stated purpose. The corporate takeover of food and agriculture, pharmaceuticals and healthcare, even the military in clandestine agendas to fatten, dull, sicken, and control a populace already consumed by consumerism.
And I encourage you all to go shopping more.
A government that taps your phone, collects your data, and monitors your whereabouts with impunity. A government preparing to use that data against you when it strikes. And the final takeover begins.
The takeover of America.
By a well-oiled and well-armed multinational group of elites that will cull, kill, and subjugate.
Happening as we sit here.
It's happening all around us.
The other shoe waiting to drop.
It'll probably start on a Friday. The banks will announce a security action necessitating their computers to go offline all weekend.
Digital money will disappear.
They can just steal your money?
Followed by the detonation of strategic electromagnetic pulse bombs to knock out major grids.
What will seem like an attack on America by terrorists or Russia.
An invasion of the U.S.
The Russians tried it in 47.
Then there's this one.
Your father created a world-changing, not world-ending, a world-changing, world-improving omnivirus. And we have taken that virus and embedded it in the vaccine of the Stearns flu.
I knew it. I knew it. He created a panic and now everybody's begging for the vaccine.
No. Demanding it. With all the entitlement of a first world country.
Yes. And now we have exactly what we want. Hundreds of millions of Americans lining up, offering us their arms, and letting us give them our creation.
I'm pretty sure when every vaccinated person starts dying, they'll trace it back to undetectable virus or not.
You've all been very busy. You're all very sharp. Are you sure none of you would like to come and work for me? No? Then understand this. What we are doing is far bigger than death.
Wait, this virus is not deadly.
It looks pretty damn deadly.
Tell me this. What have you done today to earn your place in this crowded world? Exactly. Everything I do is a cure for our current situation.
Wait, how's it a cure?
You're killing people.
I told you it does not kill. That was the amazing epiphany we had. We didn't have to kill to accomplish our...
What?
We intend to stop human reproduction for 3 generations. The busy, endless global assembly line of babies will grind to a halt.
You're sterilizing people?
Uh-huh. In the first 5 years, we'll start to see major birth rate declines as teenagers vaccinated today hit their childbearing years.
You're controlling the future of human civilization.
Is that what they're calling it? It's a very nice euphemism for a species that has replicated like a contagion across the planet, killing all other species in its wake. Except things that are cute, like puppies or koalas.
Pandas.
Never in history has there been a creature begging for extinction more than the fucking panda. Except us.
You hate people that much?
On the contrary, I love people.
Then how? Why would...
Doing what our government or citizenry is too spoiled or self-indulgent to do. We are saving ourselves from ourselves.
Halting overpopulation.
100 years ago, the global population was 1.7 billion. 2011, it reached
7 billion.
People live too long, die less often, fuck too much, shit out babies like...
In 2050, they say it's gonna plateau.
We'll blow past 11 billion and then slowly begin to decline.
But by then, it'll be too late to save an Earth that bears any resemblance to a world we actually want to live in.
Virus into the veins of every human on it.
Global warming, mass extinctions, food, water shortages. All these problems can be boiled down to one thing: overpopulation.
It's not as simple as that.
But it is. At 1.7 billion, we can be as decadent, self-indulgent, shitty as we want. At 10 billion, we have to live strategically. We have to live modestly. We have to live selflessly. And as you know, we're not that good at it.
And you're beta testing it on Americans since we're the worst.
If we don't do something now, right now, in a decade, our world will experience extraordinary privations. The war of all against all.
Water. We'll go to war over water, and the people who will die first are the ones without power and money.
Just decide people won't have babies because...
I can and I did.
Now, if this scenario were actually what was going on, you'd probably be freaking out. Friends, art imitates life. They've already told us what their plan is. They've been telling us for a really long time. We just weren't listening. They caught us off guard. They caught us asleep. They used psychological warfare against us. They've been using it for decades against us. There's more.
You just have to raise enough questions, spread enough dirt, plant enough conspiracy theorizing that citizens no longer know what to believe. Once they lose trust in their leaders, in mainstream media, in political institutions, in each other, in the possibility of truth, the game's won.
Gripping at my skin, the walls of night closing around me.
Active measures or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country.
Demoralization, then destabilization, and then crisis, and then normalization.
The final stage of subversion, after which you can simply take your enemy without a single shot being fired.
It has as its target not the body, but the mind of the enemy.
The target of psychological warfare is against the enemy's mind.
It is words and ideas.
Ammunition used by Psywar.
New world order.
A new world order.
A new world order.
A new world order.
The new world order.
This is the new world order.
To influence the thoughts of the enemy soldiers.
This is not a test. This is your emergency broadcast system. Police, fire, and emergency medical services will be unavailable until tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. when the purge concludes. Blessed be our new founding fathers and America, a nation reborn. Blessed be our new founding fathers.
There's no need to be afraid.
We don't stop an enemy. We help them to go in the direction we want them to go. Perception of reality of your enemy is screwed up to such an extent that he does not perceive you as an enemy. The final stage of subversion, after which you can simply take your enemy without a single shot being fired. The United States is in the state of war. Undeclared total war.
We're coming for your children.
leadership over there has been so welcoming to my not at all secret gay agenda.
Your leftists in United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. The disaster is coming closer and closer. The danger is real.
We are grooming the new generation of Americans.
Dreams are my speciality. Through dreams, I influence mankind. My dream is of eternity with you.
$15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students.
If someone would have told me 15 years ago that our own government here in the United States would make war against its own citizens, I would have called you a conspiracy theorist. I did prison ministry for 6 years where my focus was on the topic of Daniel, which is prophecy. I have spent a great deal of time in the book of Daniel, studying history and the pursuit of understanding, along with the book Revelation. And friend, it is my belief that we are currently in the time of Jacob's trouble, and that Revelation has much to say about what has transpired and will continue to transpire. And because of a word, a Greek word, pharmakia, I'm going to ask that you would pay close attention to what this virologist has to say next.
Today I'm talking to you because it is about your children. And I'm really begging you. I'm begging you.
I'm really begging you too.
To not vaccinate your children against COVID-19. I will explain you that if you vaccinate them, if you vaccinate children, it's gonna become 1,000 times worse. So if you are going to vaccinate your children, you are going to turn this transient situation into something that is permanent, that is going to suppress the innate immune system for a long time, that it is not going to be able to be trained or to be educated to recognize all the viruses it should recognize, but instead can even be pushed to recognize components of its own body that suppress, in fact, or that will lead to autoreactivity and immune pathology. And that is irreversible. Think about this. This is irreversible. I'm very, very serious. So it will lead to a tremendous storm of acute COVID death. There is no doubt about this. And very severe immune pathology. I swear you, I have 30 years of vaccine expertise. This is not a joke. And there is no way that parents can simply accept the very cheap publicity and, the mainstream message, get your child vaccinated. It is extremely dangerous. What I'm talking about is much more dangerous even than the side effects that people are discussing. So please bear this in mind. I beg you, I really beg you, don't vaccinate your child, because in many cases, it will be a death sentence for the child. Thank you.
I'm going to be very clear about this, and I've recently just testified in the U.S. Senate, December 7th, 2022. The vaccine is killing people, and is killing large numbers of people. It fulfills all the criteria for the Bradford Hill tenets of causality for a medicinal product causing death. Our CDC, as of December 23rd, 2022, has over 16,000 Americans that have died within a few days of taking the vaccine. And that's probably a gross underreport.
So as we sit here today, if the topic of discussion is childhood vaccination, it is clear, based on publications of representative data, that the risks far outweigh any potential benefits of vaccinating children. And the data are clear. And in the last few weeks now, reports have come in, one from Connecticut, with oversight from the pathology from the University of Michigan and from the University of Minnesota, on 2 teenage boys who died on days 3 and 4 after the Pfizer vaccine. And the parents were horrified to find the children dead at home. Autopsies were performed, and the conclusion was crystal clear. The vaccines caused the death, with massive heart inflammation and evidence of superimposed catecholamine injury on the heart. Fatal reports have come in from Choi and from Verma, Choi in Korea, Verma from Washington University in St. Louis. It is clear that a vaccine is being pushed, is being encouraged, and mandating that, in fact, results in death of children. Results in death of children. One death is too many. As I've shared with you, in millions of children receiving the vaccine, they don't die of COVID-19 respiratory illness, but in fact, they die of the vaccine.
Of course, if you want to wait and see if a side effect shows up, that takes 2 years. So
an epidemic, either naturally caused or intentionally caused, is the most likely thing to cause, say, 10 million excess deaths.
Here's some facts. If you look at the World Economic Forum, which is really, they have schooled most of the world leaders right now. For example, Trudeau, Macron, Ardern, Morrison, many other world leaders. What was her name? Angela Merkel. Even Bill Gates himself was a graduate of that school. So it's not like they're without influence, the World Economic. And if you look at their agenda and their website, it's right up there. The first 2 goals, the 2030 agenda, which is now the 2030 UN agenda, is that number 1, America will no longer be a superpower. Number 2, a few nations will govern the world globally. Verified? Take a look. So my question is, how do you take the world's most powerful economy and military in human history, and in a matter of a few years, remove its superpower status? Well, I have a way. How about this? You shut down the economy and perpetrate the biggest theft of middle-class wealth in history. What do I mean? Well, over 1 million small businesses closed. And the larger corporations picked up their market share and the valuation skyrocketed. Why? Because it was very dangerous to go to the local grocery store, but it was safe to go to Walmart. It was very dangerous to buy a hammer at the local hardware store, but it was safe to go to Home Depot.
Tell us a little bit about the study that just came out of Sweden that is just so alarming.
The news is buzzing out of Lund University, Malmö, Sweden. Marcus Alden is the first author. The first demonstration in a human hepatic or liver cell line that the Pfizer vaccine, in fact, reverse transcribes and installs DNA into the human genome.
Wow. And so in simple terms, what does that mean, Dr. Bartlett?
Thank you for making it simple. So basically, there's an enzyme that can take that messenger RNA vaccine information and put it into the DNA of the person, into their DNA, DNA. And we were told that could not happen. So this is in a lab, but it's showing that you remember the vaccine is messenger RNA.
Yeah.
And we were told that that messenger RNA could not go into your DNA, but this is showing that in a lab it can.
And so what happens when it does, Dr. Gold?
Well, can I answer slightly different than your question?
Yeah.
So one of the fun things about the last couple of years being a doctor and lawyer is this is a very interesting opportunity, and I think we're going to be bringing another lawsuit because there's actually federal law that you cannot discriminate against people for genetic discriminations. I forgot the acronym. I think it's GINA, G-I-N-A. GINA, right? So this now opens the door to saying that if you're not allowing somebody in who chose not to get the shot, that you're actually engaging in genetic discrimination. So I think there's this Sweden study, I think, opens the door to a new type of lawsuit.
If you're pregnant and you have this done, can that then affect your baby?
Yes, see, this is the alarming finding. The CDC says on its website very explicitly, this will not change your DNA. The paper that came out of Sweden. Now, there'll be many more to confirm it, and the steps are to confirm it, to confirm that the entire code is installed, and then to actually confirm that it's expressed, meaning that the spike protein now is continuously expressed from human cells. But because the lipid nanoparticles are taken up everywhere, that means somatic cells in your organs, but also your gametocytes, actually the cells that actually are the sperm and the egg. If they are carrying it, that indeed means that, in fact, it could be passed to the daughter cells. And
So that could be open up for birth defects. And yes. And
in Ecclesiastes, it declares that there is nothing new under the sun. I'm going to continue to maintain, as I have since the beginning of the COVID propaganda, I have asserted that the vaccine is a biological weapon. I was censored for this repeatedly. I was finally deplatformed off of Facebook. I was deplatformed off of LinkedIn for posting a list of all of the doctors who were opposing this mainstream narrative. I was removed from Facebook, I was removed from Instagram, I was removed from Twitter, I was kicked off of LinkedIn, and I was in the midst of trying to launch a business with a friend of mine.
Censorship simply is inconsistent with democratic societies. You got 5 companies that control everything. They've sold out American democracy.
CHD and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. have joined with several other plaintiffs to sue major legacy corporations in media.
The function of the press has now become to support power against dissent, against the little person, to fortify these big aggregations of power, including government, and to prevent Americans from criticizing their government. Totalitarian regimes are about, there's one belief system, and that you gotta adhere to it or you're gonna be punished. You become a heretic. The free flow of information is the fertilizer, it's the sunshine for democracy. Those are 650,000 Americans that did not need to die during the COVID crisis.
John F. Kennedy knew a thing or two about censorship. He tried to warn us right before he was assassinated.
And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
The Chinese biological laboratory in Wuhan is owned by GlaxoSmithKline, which owns Pfizer, the one who makes the injection against the virus, which was started in the biological laboratory in Wuhan, which was funded by Dr. Fauchi, the one who promotes the injection on the world stage. GlaxoSmithKline is managed by the finance division of BlackRock, which manages the finances of the Open Foundation Group, the Soros Foundation, which manages the French AXA Group. Soros owns the German company Winterthur, which built a Chinese laboratory in Wuhan and was bought by the German Allianz, which coincidentally has Vanguard as a shareholder, who is a shareholder itself of BlackRock, which controls the central banks and manages a third of global investment capital. BlackRock is also coincidentally the major shareholder of Microsoft, owned by the eugenicist himself, Bill Gates, who coincidentally is the shareholder of BioNTech and Pfizer, which, remember, sells a miracle injection, and coincidentally was the first sponsor of the World Health Organization of the United Nations. Now that should help you understand more about how a dead bat sold at a wet market in Wuhan has apparently infected the entire planet. I will leave it at that.
All of these organizations have played a role in collectively flexing in order to suppress information and hide it from you and I to prevent us from making decisions that will allow us to protect ourselves and our families. There's more.
Dr. Rainer Fulmick is the public frontman for an international team comprised of hundreds of lawyers and medical experts who have begun legal proceedings over the CDC, the WHO, and the Davos Group for committing crimes against humanity. The protocol for the PCR test given by the WHO and the CDC was knowingly set to a level that guaranteed 100% false positives or false negatives. So there is no pandemic. This is all about getting people to take the shot. Their argument is that we are at the very least being subjected to an illegal experiment, and at the worst, global genocide. Dr. Fulmick points out how the experimental jab is in clear violation of all 10 of the Nuremberg codes, which carry the penalty of death for those who violate them. Number 1, voluntary consent is absolutely essential. There should be no intervention or any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, or any form of constraint or coercion. By definition, a vaccine must provide immunity to the virus, protect recipients from getting the virus, reduce deaths, infections, circulation, and transmission of the virus. We are told the experimental jab does none of these, yet they fraudulently call it a vaccine. As far as duress, constraint, and coercion, it's everywhere. If you want your life back, get the shot. Number 2, the experiment should be such as to yield fruitful results unprocurable by other methods. The most fruitful method would be a healthy immune system, which can be achieved through good health and natural supplements such as vitamin D, vitamin C, and zinc. But the people are not being told this. In fact, those who point it out are being vilified and silenced. Number 3, the experiment should be designed and based on the results of animal experimentation. This experimental jab skipped animal testing. Number 4, the experiment should be so conducted as to avoid all unnecessary physical and mental suffering and injury. According to official reports, there are already thousands of deaths and over 250,000 injuries from this experiment. Number 5, no experiment should be conducted where there is an a priori reason to believe that death or disabling injury will occur. Past trials have shown a strong possibility that these new spike proteins will cause a body to attack itself. This is known as antibody-dependent enhancement, or ADE. And recent doctors have blown the whistle that this could end up killing everybody who's been vaccinated in the next 2 years. Number 6, the risk should never exceed the benefit. COVID-19 has a 98 to 99% survival rate, less deadly than the seasonal flu. The experimental jab is already the most dangerous vaccine in VAERS' 30-year history. Number 7, proper preparations should be made and adequate facilities provided to protect the experimental subject against even remote possibilities of injury, disability, or death. There were no preparations made. There are no facilities. The subject shows up for their shot and goes home. Number 8, the experiment should be conducted only by scientifically qualified persons. This experiment has been exclusively run by politicians, the media, celebrities, and big pharma bureaucrats. Number 9, the subject should be at liberty to bring the experiment to an end. Thousands of medical experts have attempted to end this madness, and their voices continue to be silenced. Number 10, the experiment must be brought to an end if resulting in injury or death. And yet, the experiment pushes on. Once again, those who violate these international laws are subject to the death penalty. Legal proceedings are moving forward and evidence is being collected. Whistleblowers are directed to contact the international team at www.securewhistleblower.com. This is likely the biggest crime ever committed against the world population. And the question is, do we still have a judicial system to exact justice? For Infowars.com, this is Greg Reese.
The clinical trials were fraudulent. There are court cases ongoing right now. The manufacturing was fraudulent. They didn't do the production R&D required. It would take at least 2 years to do that. That means the regulatory authorizations were fraudulent. So FDA and CDC, the European Medicines Agency, the MHRA in Britain, they've all behaved fraudulently, pretty much by closing their eyes and just rubber stamping it. So they've not been tested, they're not safe, they don't work, they could never have worked in the elderly, and yet they are toxic. And then I talked at length, and I won't bore you with it again, that the very design of them could not have been more dangerous. They picked the only part of this purported pathogen, the spike protein, to express in your bodies. Your bodies are turned into a spike protein factory, and spike proteins are definitely acutely toxic in loads of different ways. Autoimmunity, blood clots, neurological problems, impacts on fertility and so on. So I've told you that they've created the impression of a scare. They've smashed the economy and civil society using useless measures. They've got you to wait for a rushed so-called vaccine that was not shown to be effective or safe, that never could have worked, even if the original setup about a viral threat was correct. And yet they've jabbed, 4 billion, 6 billion poor souls. Something like 1 in 1,000 people have died. We don't know how many more will die. But we're into double figures of millions who've definitely been killed as a consequence of this policy. And that tells you that the people who are doing this are ruthless, I would say diabolical. That we're beyond good and wrong and right, okay? We're in the good versus evil. I've not been a religious person, but I'm absolutely clear in my mind the only people, the kind of planning and thinking it takes to have done what has happened are people who would worship Satan. They're not normal people. I couldn't do one part of this and continue to be alive after I've done it.
And they redid the data from that New England Journal of Medicine article. And I remember in June, because I was with you, Maureen, and we were in Tampa. And there was a med student there from Israel, and he texted me and he said, wait, am I reading this data right? Because it looks to me like, if you really just look at the data in the article, and the article said, these vaccines are safe. And then you read the actual data and you see that if someone got the shot in the first 20 weeks of pregnancy, they have an 80% miscarriage rate. Okay. And we don't really call it a miscarriage after week 12. From 12 weeks on, that is, well, viability is, maybe 24 weeks. Larry can speak to that. But we're now having losses in the third trimester. That's not a miscarriage in any way, shape, or form. And the other thing that Thorpe points out is that women, once, let's say that they get through the pregnancy, the number of stillbirths is way, way up. It's way beyond what it should have been. So with the VAERS data, 2,433 fetal deaths in the VAERS database. Waterloo, Ontario, 86 stillbirths in 5 months. Usually there are 5 per year. Vancouver, 13 in 24 hours. Scotland, 21 in 1 month. As an OBGYN, I maybe saw 3 stillbirths, maybe 4 in my entire career of delivering babies. Can you imagine being on the staff at one of these hospitals, Waterloo, where they've got 86 stillborns in 5 months?
So I look at the data as part of my belief in my ability to observe objective reality and make decisions based on it. And when I look at the data, it terrifies me. There are so many unknowns from the long-term safety that I'm scared for everyone who's taken this. And truly, I sit down at night sometimes and cry because I have so many friends who've taken this vaccine, and I worry about them in the long term. We don't have long-term safety data. What we do know is that this protein, the spike protein, can bind to proteins in the brain that can cause long-term side effects, potentially. We know that the vaccines cause neurological side effects. We know that they have the ability to get to the brain. Everybody who's taken it should be deeply concerned from that perspective alone, that the long-term side effects are unknown.
Things I've reported that the volunteers have found, what I'm about to share is probably the most disturbing and the most important. Basically, this report written by a female physician analyzing the documents shows that pregnant women were excluded from the trials before they concluded it was safe and effective. They concluded it was safe and effective based on mice and the autopsies of mice fetuses, and that horrifically the Department of Defense data shows that female soldiers' pregnancies are experiencing an absolutely catastrophic rate of abnormalities and fetal problems. So it's so important. I'm just going to read it. It's super fast. She says, to date, there have not been any human clinical trials. This is really real, what you're hearing, conducted by a COVID-19 vaccine pharmaceutical company to determine if vaccines are safe during pregnancy or while breastfeeding. All emergency use authorizations exclude pregnant women, and no COVID-19 vaccine has been approved for use during pregnancy. Astonishingly, however, she says, many professional organizations have strongly advocated despite that pregnant women get this vaccine despite any lack of safety data. And what she points out is, thanks to the court-ordered release of the confidential Pfizer documents, which the FDA wanted sealed for 75 years, we have learned that pregnant women and breastfeeding mothers were excluded from phase 1, 2, and 3 of the human trials. One recently released Pfizer document lists 21 groups of people who were excluded from all phases of the Pfizer trials and specifically singles out, quote, women who are pregnant and breastfeeding as not able to participate in any of the trials. And she gives the citation. Despite this, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, all of these obstetrics and gynecological organizations were strong advocates for vaccinating pregnant and lactating women. And even though none were approved. How, she asked, could they possibly be promoting an experimental untested vaccine for pregnant women? As it turns out, their clinical recommendations are based on a faulty study conducted on a few dozen rats in France. Before any research trials can be performed on human pregnant women, a new drug must first be tested on pregnant animals. These are called developmental and reproductive toxicity, or DART studies. They state that the DART studies for the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine have been reported in Europe, and according to these animal studies, they don't indicate direct or indirect harmful effects with respect to pregnancy, embryo, fetal development, or postnatal development. However, what was that based on? Given the extreme importance, one would expect the study to be conducted by independent researchers using a robust design. But she reviewed the study, and she writes, this is a doctor. She writes, it is astounding to discover that it was performed in a mere 44 rats and for a length of only 42 days. Then she gives the citation. To their credit, it turns out that rats are the perfect mammal to do pregnancy studies on because they only need 21 days from conception to delivery. So in the study, half of the rat pregnancies were terminated at day 21 by C-section, and the fetuses were removed from the mother and studied. The other half were allowed to give birth. And then they terminated the study. That's it. And she points out this is long before any developmental issues could have been observed in the offspring and precludes any long-term safety or fertility studies. This 42-day study on 44 pregnant rats led them to conclude that there were, quote, no effects on female fertility. But she points out there were two glaring problems with the study. It does not require the requirements of the DART study to make sure that they're okay into the next generation. So there's no way to know if there were adverse effects on rats. And the other huge glaring study is a disclaimer that I sent to your producer, which should shock you. She says there's no way these investigators could be unbiased. Why? They were employed by and held stock in either Pfizer or BioNTech. I'm going to say this again. The doctors who concluded based on 44 French rats that the vaccine was safe for pregnant women were employed by Pfizer or owned BioNTech and Pfizer's stock. They tried to hide this by using only initials instead of full names. In spite of that, pregnant women were encouraged to get vaccinated. So looking at the actual VAERS adverse event reports, what you see is that this had horrific outcomes. This section covering pregnancy and lactation on pages 12 to 13 reveals that 20% of the 413 reported cases of adverse events for pregnant women were, quote, serious. These include 25 miscarriages, 5 fetal deaths, as well as uterine contractions during pregnancy, preterm deliveries, premature rupture of membranes, and fetal growth restriction, meaning the babies could not develop fully. Also included were serious and less serious adverse side effects of breastfed babies that included infantile vomiting, fever, rash, agitation, and allergy to the vaccine. 6 women having adverse events who got the vaccine while breastfeeding included partial paralysis, suppressed lactation, breast pain, migraines, and breast milk discoloration. And Pfizer's response to the above alarming data in the secret documents was there were no safety signals that emerged from the review of these cases of use in pregnancy and while breastfeeding. The last thing I'm going to say in this shocking report is that this doctor also looked right there at the Department of Defense data, which has been exposed by 3 whistleblowers represented by attorney Tom Rentz. And what they're showing, again, I keep raising the question of, is this a national security breach? Is this a national security breach? Because we don't know the level of micrograms that were given to female pregnant soldiers in our military, or to any of the soldiers in our military, or sailors, or Air Force members. And that we've shown makes a difference, because when you get up to 100 micrograms, people get very, very sick. So in this database, they observed disturbing evidence of dramatic increases in serious medical conditions among military personnel in 2021. And among these are congenital malformations of fetuses. The rise in congenital malformations increased dramatically from a baseline rate of 10,906 cases per year to in 2021, when female soldiers and sailors and pilots were being forced to take this experimental vaccine, it rose to 18,951 congenital malformations for even part of the year of 2021. For part of the year of 2021, it nearly doubled the fetuses of our brave women soldiers, sailors, Air Force members who were pregnant, who submitted to what our president said they had to do as the commander-in-chief, took this experimental vaccine. Their babies suffered. And this is a criminal attack on our military, on the brave women and men in our military. The NIH concludes that it's safe and effective in spite of these numbers for pregnant women. And she makes a final point that all of the spokesmodels use the phrase, the data suggest it's safe and effective. And she points out that the word suggest is one of those weasel words that really represents the lowest level of certainty, quote unquote, expert opinion. She concludes the evidence is clear. that the potential risks of pregnant women getting vaccinated with the new mRNA COVID-19 vaccines, the far outweigh the benefits. And this is honestly one of the worst things I've ever seen in my 35 years as a reporter. This is an attack on American women. It's an attack on pregnant women, intentionally or not intentionally. The fact that Pfizer saw these data, the American Gynecologists and Obstetrics Organizations knew of this data, the FDA knew of this data, that, 44 French rats were autopsied and their fetuses are fine, so go ahead and get injected, pregnant woman who trusts me. This is a crime that every single mother, grandmother, husband, who cares about women of childbearing age should be horrified and appalled by. It is a major criminal act, and I really have to ask, knowing about this data and letting female soldiers take this vaccine and jeopardize the health and offspring of their children, which is going to tie up hamper our fighting capacity, right? If you're dealing with an injured, a congenitally abnormal baby and child, what is that going to do to our military preparedness? These are massive crimes.
Hi everyone, it's Naomi Wolf of Daily Clout. I wanted to let you know why I'd been deplatformed from Twitter last week. News outlets are stating that it was for vaccine misinformation. This is not true. I was deplatformed in the act of uploading a video in which I read verbatim a press release from State Senator Kim Thatcher of Oregon about her Bill 872 to ban vaccine passports and mask mandates in the state of Oregon. But I was also deplatformed 24 hours after posting a video of my husband, Brian O'Shea, a private investigator. He and others had located Dr. Ralph Barrick's CV on a public website. The CV identifies over $14 million from the NIH, including for gain-of-function research. Dr. Barrick's CV also specifies Dr. Shizheng Li, the quote-unquote bat lady scientist from the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
The first time I heard the name Naomi Wolf, I was in college. I was in an English class, and I had stumbled across a book that she had written. It was called The End of America, a letter of warning to a patriot. And Naomi had written a book that was rather alarming. I read her book. And I also read the Communist Manifesto and realized that it was being implemented here in America. Now, here's the thing that troubles me the most about Naomi's book is it caused me to begin examining George Bush a little more closely. I didn't do it right away because I was offended, to be completely frank with you. But since I have taken the time to do a deep dive on George Bush and his family and reading other books by other authors, I've come to an understanding of him that is deeply disturbing. And we're going to circle back around. I'm going to borrow a phrase from this poopy administration we have right now. I'm going to circle back around to that guy later in another video, because it's important for you to understand the plight that we face as Americans. Thank you for following me this far. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey in this first hour. Please like and subscribe. Hit that button down below. And if you really do feel like I'm informative, please share. There are more videos to come. Thanks, friend. Have a great day. And remember, in the New Testament, Paul says that we're to test all things. That means to prove. And that includes conspiracy theories too. It's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth.
I wrote a book about Operation Paperclip, and my God, talk about a rabbit's hole.
That's a rabbit hole.
It's a rabbit hole.
Let's explain to people that don't know what we're talking about. Operation Paperclip was when, after World War II, the United States gathered up a ton of scientists from Nazi Germany, brought them over to America, and even Werner von Braun. They had Werner von Braun run NASA. He was a Nazi, like 100% Nazi.
Good friends with Hitler type Nazi.
Yes, he ran a Berlin rocket factory where they hung the 5 slowest Jews. They would hang them out front so everybody would know, like, this is what happens when you work slow. We'll hang you. I mean, the Simon Wiesenthal Center said that if Werner von Braun was alive today, they would prosecute him for crimes against humanity.
Yes, they would.
And that was the head of NASA. That was the guy who got us to the moon. That was the big cheese guy. Yeah. So we were willing to put a lot of really dark things aside in order to gather up the best scientists so that the Soviet Union couldn't get them all. And they got a few of them as well. But we got how many? More than 1,000, right?
Allegedly 1,400, but I would not be surprised if, the story changes and there were more, right?
Yeah.
But that goes back to our discussion earlier about being in pole position. I mean, that's why we grabbed those Nazis. We were like, if we don't get them, the Russians will.
I get it. And
today, more than ever before, our survival, yours and mine and our children's, depends on our adherence to ethical principles. Ethics alone will decide whether atomic energy will be an earthly blessing or the source of mankind's utter destruction.
The Massachusetts Institute of Technology invention has been dubbed a real-life matrix.
Terry, they pioneered the internet, DARPA, and now they are pioneering our interface to our brain. And if you think the internet is big, if you think blockchain is big, this is going to blow it all away. Because there's nothing bigger than connecting our minds to the internet.
It's almost as if they're either trying to harness or to recreate what is commonly referred to as a collective consciousness.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day.
They know that if they can control people by controlling their minds, then they don't need to fire any shots. They don't need bullets. They don't need the war machine.